MCC Dad Cyclist Diaries, we are back for episode 6 and the final episode of the Hill Climber season prep. So after the 8-9 week prep going into the 2 main hill climbs that I was targeting this spring, I have now completed both events. And today I just wanted to go through, how they went, both in terms of the performance, but review the training, nutrition that I've been going through and taking you through on the journey over that 8-9 weeks and the preparation there, just to share that with you, but also, just document it as part of my own journey for years to come to also, reflect back on, I guess. So the first event was on the 29th of May. It was our district hill climb championships here. The course was 6.5 kilometres and it had 621 metres of elevation gain there with an average gradient of 9.4%. Going into the week of that event, that was actually when I did that past video to just talk through how I was prepping for the event. Things were going really well with training. I had some really good VO2 max sessions, some final sessions to go into there. I did my activation ride prior. Numbers were looking really good there. In terms of the weight side of things and nutrition, probably actually one of the best years in terms of my nutrition, fueling, but also weight management going into these hill climbs. My target over the prep, I think I was around mid sort of 70 or low 78 kilos. And I actually arrived on the day at 74.1 kg. So my target was to get into that 74 kg bracket. And on the day I weighed in at 74.1 kilos. So I was really happy with, especially the weight side of things and power numbers preparation, despite, as I mentioned, over the winter, having almost half or less than half the amount of training, numbers were looking okay going into that event. My previous PB on this course, on this hill climb and at this event after a full winter of training and preparation was 25 minutes and around 31 seconds, sustained power of 377 watts at a weight of 75 kg. My target for this course this year was to arrive at 74 kg, but then sustain a power of around 370 watts, 375. That was the target going to the event, to try and really get as close to that PB time as I possibly could with the amount of training and prep that I'd had done compared to previous years. So the day before, on the Friday, the event was on the Saturday, the 29th. On the Friday, I did my activation ride. I always do an activation ride, certainly before any hill climbs, but also time trials or any longer events, really just to get the legs primed. So I perform about an hour and 15-minute ride. It will be a 20 to 30-minute warm-up around zone 2. I will then perform 2 4-minute efforts at FTP with around 8 minutes easy sort of zone 1, zone 2 spinning between. And the reason I perform this is just to get the systems firing, get the muscles firing, and so that that first climb or if it's a time trial, as soon as you go up to those wattages, it doesn't really smack you in the face, and that despite maybe tapering a little bit going into an event there, that you have kept some intensity, and I find is really important, so you can just feel that the legs are firing, feeling good and in form on the day. My warm-up on the day then normally consists of a 20-minute warm-up again at around zone 2. I will then perform 5 60-second bursts at FTP with 60 seconds recovery in between each of those efforts. Now, I will normally always take my turbo trainer with me to the event, especially if it's a time trial or a hill climb, and perform the warm-up on the turbo trainer. This year I did things slightly differently. I wanted to try and actually perform that warm-up on the road itself. So I actually rode out to a climb which was pretty much next to the hill climb or the course that we were riding on the day, and I performed those 5 60-second bursts there. So how did the event go? Conditions on the day were a bit of a shock to the system. Certainly, we'd gone through the whole of May, as you've probably seen in a lot of my other videos. And if you were watching a Duro this year, it was very wet, it was very cold. And then on the 29th of May, for some reason, it decided to really go up to almost 30 degrees on the day. The start time of this hill climb was 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and the climb itself was open in the blazing sun. It was almost, I think 28 degrees when we were actually riding up the climb. But being completely honest, it was a massive shock to the system. But the ride itself, I felt actually went really well. Certainly the early part of the climb, as I say, it's around about a 25-minute effort on that climb there, 25 to 30 minutes, obviously depending on how long it takes you to get up there. And the first 10 minutes of the climb, I was feeling really strong, sustaining around. My pacing strategy was to really try and sit at that sort of 370, 380 mark and not go too much above that. The first part of the climb is really quite steep. It goes up to sort of 15% in that initial ramp. So I always see, on the power, on the bike computer, 400 watts just to really sustain a good pace to get up there. But generally the first half of the ride felt like the pacing was really going well. It was then from the midpoint, so around sort of 10-12 minutes, that when it really opened up. The initial part of the climb is actually quite closed in the forest, in the shade. It then opens up and there's no shelter there, and that's where I really felt like the heat was actually really did get me, and I was noticing those power numbers were dropping a bit, and I was really fighting to sustain that. And I really put this down to, maybe that more sustained power and that endurance side of things, with that sustained power due to maybe the slight lack of training, I think played a factor in this, but certainly also just that heat smacking all of us in the face. I was speaking to a lot of my fellow riders and teammates and guys who just obviously ride with, and it really caught everyone by surprise, just going through the whole of May, riding in very cool temperatures. And the first real hot day of the year was actually the day of the climb, and I think everybody on the back end really struggled with the heat there. So ended up actually finishing the climb in a time of 26 minutes and 50 seconds. So about a minute and 20 seconds off of what my personal best has been on there. Sustained power across that 26 minutes and 50 seconds was 350 watts. I think it was about 351 watts. My weight on the day, as I mentioned, was 74.1 kg. So in terms of power targets, what I was really aiming for was actually quite a bit under. And again, as I say, I think I put this down to one, maybe the lack of training, not as much training going in, but also the heat just really on the back end of the climb, really affecting power numbers there. But all in all, generally, that put me at about 4.7 watts per kilo for the effort. And as it was the first event of the year and the time of year that it is, and considering everything that went on earlier in the year, if you've been following this series, how it was really up and down over the winter, and having that 2 months in hospital, with my daughter being completely off the bike, not doing any training whatsoever, I think that despite the prep being really good and really getting into a real good structure, this has really highlighted for me, certainly in the early parts of the season, if you do miss even a big bulk of training over the winter, or even a month of training over the winter, certainly obviously 2 months doing absolutely nothing, the effect this can have, even if you then manage to get back into some structured training after. As I say, for the first event, certainly happy with that 4.7 watts per kilo. It was off the PB. I know where maybe now going into next year's climb, certainly the spring climbs there, what I need to really dial in on. And I think with a normal winter of preparation, obviously, as I say, the weight side of things really arrived at really happy with that, and how I managed that weight loss gradually alongside the training going into that first event. There's certainly some positives to take there, and learn a lot from that. And obviously the heat as well. On the day with the heat, the start time, this is something with this particular event, we always say, why they do it at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It would be nice if they did that earlier in the morning, just when it's a bit cooler, but that's something that you just have to deal with. And when you're actually on an all-out climb like this, actually trying to, what you can do to reduce that, you don't want to take too much fluid on for that effort, because certainly when it's a ramp of around 10% average gradient, any weight that you do add is just going to affect performance. So it's really just, on the course, I did have some guys who were helping, you could grab a bottle, maybe throw some cool water over just to help with that cooling a little bit. But the heat obviously can really certainly make them influence the perceived exertion, but also the exertion itself. Going into the second event was actually directly the weekend after, on the 4th of June. The week between, kept up some training, kept some intensity in there as well, some threshold work, a little bit of VO2 max, obviously some rest around that as well. Really just to carry that momentum from that initial climb and event, which I always find is nice, because you really get some form just from obviously doing that race and event anyway. And then through that week, obviously took some rest days after, but then got back in to keep some intensity there and keep that form building, then going into the next event on the 4th of June. The event on the 4th of June then was sort of a county championships, but we get a lot of riders coming over from Italy, sometimes even some pro teams from the south of Germany coming to do this event. And the course for this is around 5.6 kilometers, and it has 500 meters of elevation as part of this hill climb. So a bit of a shorter one, but certainly some steep ramps in there. The average gradient of this climb was 8.7%. Again, followed my structure going into this. So this event was actually on the Sunday. So I did my activation ride exactly as I did for the week before. Did my 2 4-minute FTP efforts there going into it. And then the warm up for the event, this is actually something that I changed, and I switched back to my old or my normal, if you like, strategy of using the turbo trainer for the warm up, as I found that yeah, it was good to try that warm up on the road, but I just found that it's a lot more thorough when I'm on the trainer. I can really hit those numbers there. And this has worked really well in the past. And even though I wanted to experiment with it, I thought, you know what, I'm just going to go back to what I normally do. So for this event, I performed my 5 60-second bursts at FTP. I did that full thing on the trainer there, went through it with my mechanic who helps me there as we normally sort of do our pre-race routine and stuck to that. In terms of the nutrition and fueling quickly going into these events, so the day before, I will really just keep things normal, day-to-day nutrition. I won't go over the top on any carbohydrate loading strategies that you may do if you're obviously going to do a longer stage race or stage event or long sportif where the mileage and the intensity is going to be a lot higher. Because these are shorter hill climbs, 20 to 30 minute effort, day-to-day nutrition, it will just be sort of normal the day before. I had 200 to 250 grams of carbohydrate as my daily total. But the day before both events, protein intake was between 150 to 200 grams. And overall calorie intake the day prior to the events was between 2,700 to 2,900 calories. So yeah, as I say, when you're doing these events, obviously because weight does play such an important part on performance, the day before you want to really control that, ensure that you are having just enough carbohydrates to ensure that muscle and liver glycogen is topped up well, so you do have the energy for those efforts, but you don't want to start adding loads and loads of carbs in because obviously that'll make you, it could even make you up to 1.5 to 2 kg heavier when you then wake up the next day on the morning of the event, and that will obviously have a big effect on performance there. So yeah, normal day-to-day nutrition, just enough to fuel the activation ride before, so you can I could have those 2 good quality 4-minute efforts, but feeling good, fuel up the legs, but keep things on track with the weight, which allowed me to both days turn up at 74.1 kg. Certainly on the first day. I think the second event I was about 74.3, so well within that target. Fueling on the day of the event, and as I mentioned with the 29th, that first event, the start time is actually 2 o'clock in the evening, which is actually a bit of a trickier one to go with that on the day fueling strategy. It's always nice when it's first thing in the morning because you can just wake up, have your breakfast and go and do the event. So on the 29th, I woke up, I just had a couple of slices of toast with some jam on there just to get a little bit of carbohydrate in, coffee, I think a protein yogurt or something. And then later in the morning, the event start time was at around 2 o'clock, I think about 11:30. I had my normal sort of muesli. I just had a few Frosties on top of those, obviously with milk. And that gave me, I weigh that out just to make sure that it gives me between 1 to 1.5 grams of carbohydrate per kg of body weight. That is, I'm actually close. I normally always go to the higher side of that range. So 1.5 grams of carbohydrate per kg of body weight. That was pretty much at 11:30. I then went and did my warm up. Whilst I was doing my warm up, I had my carbohydrate mix in my bottle. So I was just drinking that through just to top up on carbs, and then went and did the effort there. For the second event on the 4th, timing was a lot better. My start time, this was an individual TT hill climb time trial. So we came down the ramp, had set times to roll down the ramp and do this. The first one was a sort of a group hill climb. So the peloton rode up the climb together. The second event was an individual TT, so my start time was at 10:15, and this was a much nicer time to obviously fuel. So I literally woke up, went through my routine with just having my muesli with some Frosties there, and then, as I mentioned, I did my warm up on the trainer. Whilst I was doing my warm up on the trainer there, I just had my carbohydrate mix in my bottle, which had some electrolytes in it as well, and that was my fueling strategy on the day with that 1.5 grams of carbs per kg of body weight, using the muesli and the cereal and granola there to be able to achieve that amount and ensure that I was fueled well. So my previous PB on this second hill climb was actually in 2021. I did the climb in 23 minutes and 7 seconds. My sustained power on the day there was 375 watts. And again, that was at a weight of 75 kilos. So despite the lower power from the previous weekend, my target was obviously that 370 watts. And I achieved the 351 watts over that sustained effort. With this climb being slightly shorter, my target was certainly to try and get as close as I could to that 375 watts at that weight of 74 kg. And on this event, I'm happy to say I got a lot closer. My time actually was slightly slower than my PB. I was 23 minutes and 27 seconds. So I was 20 seconds slower. But my sustained wattage was 365 watts at that weight of 74 kilos. So yeah, 4.9 watts per kilo. I was just off of my target of where I wanted to be and a little bit slower, but obviously a big improvement with the wattage from the previous weekend, which I think highlighted for me, one, obviously the heat certainly did take its toll the weekend prior. With the start time on the second race being at 10:15 in the morning, it was a lot cooler, which was, a lot nicer there. Obviously, it is slightly a shorter event, which would obviously mean that I was able to maybe sustain a slightly higher power for longer, but I think the heat really was a major contributing factor with the weekend prior. And also that, yeah, I think the form that was carried over maybe from the previous weekend, doing that first event of the year and really pushing myself there. Then the workouts the week after, I think I actually really gained some nice fitness through that. And, it's that race fitness, which a lot of people refer to as well, which really does bring some good form. And I think, the more when you're in a race block or a period of races back to back, you actually really build some nice form, obviously not just through the training that you're doing, but those race efforts as well. So I think it was really nice to have the race the weekend prior. I have these so close at this time of year. Normally this second event is a lot later in the year. So it was really nice to have these two hill climbs quite close together as it built some form for that. So yeah, at the end of this climb, I was completely done in the finish, but I would really happy with my performance, especially in the second event, as it's getting back or closer to where previous form was. As I say, still maybe around 10 to 15 watts off maybe some of my previous top end power and efforts there. But certainly, again, as I say, based on the training, less than half the amount of training that I've done in previous years. Really happy and feeling really good. Over the past few weeks now, I've just been going out and enjoying some riding, still keeping some structure in there. I've got the TT bike out and done some rides on that and sessions there. And again, I've found that doing those two race efforts has really built some good race fitness there as well, if you like. And that alongside the training sessions, actually putting out some of my best numbers now. I did a VO2 max workout, I think it was last week. I did 4 4-minute efforts, 435 watts, which is some of my best sort of VO2 max power or VO2 max sessions there with those efforts. So yeah, built some good fitness. Unfortunately, I don't have any sort of short-term races coming up now. It would have been maybe nice to book something in straight away to get some more races in. Going to be targeting some TTs towards the mid to the back end of the summer now. So yeah, getting some more time on the time trial bike, probably try and maybe do a bit of hill climbing. But for now, just going to be enjoying getting out on the bike, doing some riding, still performing some structured training as I really just enjoy doing quality training, structured training and working on that there. And of course, yeah, just getting out, enjoying the summer in the Alps, riding the bike, some climbs, some new routes. But yeah, as well, more importantly, spending some good quality time with the family, because I think when you are really in such a focused training block, and this year for me, it was so much more focused because, as I say, I just had not done anywhere near as much training through the winter. I really wanted that 8-9 weeks to be so focused around the training and the nutrition, and I managed to drop that 4 kilos in that period and get my power back to okay levels, as I say, despite having 2 months completely off of any form of exercise. When you're in hospital and you can't go anywhere or do anything or get out, then you can't get any really exercise in, certainly high intensity exercise. So yeah, really happy with how it went. Just like to take the opportunity to say thank you for guys who have maybe followed this series. Really appreciate your support on the page and the channel. If you have found it useful, I hope you've maybe been able to take some tips from around the nutrition, the fueling, the types of training sessions that I've been doing, the prep, the structure of some of the weeks. Again, apologies that not much of it was outdoors, and pretty much all of it, I think every single video was actually done in here. I did a few videos on the trainer. And that was just because the month of May was so wet and cold. But yeah, I guess on the channel now going forward, I'm definitely going to try and just get some footage of some of the training sessions that I'm going to be doing, some footage on the time trial bike, but also, yeah, just exploring some of the bigger climbs and the terrain out here in Austria, which will hopefully be quite interesting. And I guess when I maybe then start to, I've got some time trial dates that are starting to put in the calendar now, I'll maybe do a bit of a TT prep there and take you through that. Again, just to, if you find it useful, it helps you, that's absolutely amazing. I'd love that, but also just document it for myself. But yeah, in the meantime, guys, just say, I hope you've had a fantastic start to your spring and things are going well with your training. It is actually, I think, Father's Day coming this weekend as well in the UK. So yeah, Dad Cyclist Diaries, that's the name of this, the sort of series or what I do with these episodes. So yeah, wishing happy Father's Day to everybody out there, parents out there. Try to do these videos as well, just to inspire maybe dads and fathers out there, mums as well, mothers, that yeah, it is possible to still try and, get some good structured training in, push yourself and be the best version of yourself, alongside having, crazy lives with having kids, children and everything else. But yeah, guys, thank you so much. Fuel smart, ride strong. Speak to you soon.